Welcome to Imperfect Momming. Our children are constantly looking to us for examples. The term role model doesn't quite cut it here. We are shaping their worldview with every move we make. You see, it's not in the lectures we give or moments where we are actively attempting to teach them. It's in the micro movements we make, the unconscious ways in which we navigate life. We are constantly teaching our children how to show up for themselves, their friends, their future partners, and even their future children. So what can we do to ensure we are raising thoughtful, compassionate, self-aware human beings? We have to become them ourselves. No one is perfect, but we can still all be better, and it starts with self-healing. Let's get to it. Welcome back to Imperfect Momming, and we have a very special guest today. Janelle Kent is your last name, right? Okay. Yep. Welcome to Imperfect Momming.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here to chat today.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I am a mother. I have three beautiful young girls. I consider myself a retired teacher. I'm definitely too young to be retired. However, lots of things happen in life, and I decided that going back to the classroom just wasn't for me at this time in my life. And so what I've decided to do instead is, because I love kids, I love working with kids. I can't let that part of my life go. So I've turned my educational career, my mommying, into a career of coaching kids and obviously supporting parents in that process as well.
That's very cool. And I didn't know that you were a child's coach versus a parenting coach, because I've seen your videos about parenting and that are directed towards the parents. So cool to know that.
Yeah. I was just gonna say you have to talk to the parents, right? Because they're the ones on the front line. But what I love about my coaching is that wherever possible with the kids, you have to be a certain age, right, to sit in front of a Zoom and really engage with somebody online like that. But I really like to coach the kids because there's a lot of reasons. Do you want to hear them all right now?
Give us a couple.
Okay, I'll give you the biggest ones. I mean, I'm a teacher, I'm a coach. And when I sit down to work with my own kids on whether it's reading or maybe it's some math or maybe it is, emotional regulation, they hear my message, but I'm still mom. That's the bottom line. And so it's the same for all kids out there. And I experienced this as a teacher as well. So the beautiful thing about me being able to coach the children one-on-one is that I come with this authority that parents don't have because they're in it with their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And you could even be telling your child, sending that same message. We talked to Dan Siegel just a few minutes ago. You can be talking hand model of the brain with your kid and be like, yeah, okay, whatever, and maybe not buy into it. And then I can talk to them and do that same thing. And they'll be like, oh, look at this. I learned this today. And I just finished telling you that. So there's something innate about being in it as the parent, and your child just maybe not giving you as much credibility as you deserve. But as the coach, I get to step in and do a lot of the same things you're doing, but it just carries a lot more weight.
And I always say that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And it's true across the board. But I would assume that it's especially true for the parent-child conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. My son has started labeling my conversations with him as life lessons.
Ooh.
Because he's been getting a lot of life lessons lately. I think that's why he came up with that. I don't know. And I'm trying to remember the coaching tool of like, we need permission to give them, to work on a problem. And as parents, we don't feel like we need that permission, but getting permission, it'll go a long way.
Absolutely. That's a really great way to describe it.
Yeah, he's been frustrated with his video games, and they're we don't even we're all frustrated with the video games. We don't like the ones that he's playing. And he gets very emotional about it, and it's disruptive to the peace in the households. We're pretty chill around here, and so when he's screaming at the video game, it's just like everybody tenses up, and the dog hides from him or tries to comfort him and then gets shunned and tries to hide from him. And we were talking, and I was like, we need to figure out a way to calm down. And he goes, Mom, I don't know how. I need you to teach me how to calm down. I'm like, I don't know. I just like, it's second nature to me now that when something disruptive happens to me, that we call it a reframe. We just change the way that we think about it. And then I'm not upset anymore. But I didn't have that language when he was asking me until we got a new dog. And I don't know if you're familiar, but having a new dog is like having a new child. It's really, I didn't know the correlations were that it was so compatible. But this new dog came in. She's 10 months old, and she almost hurt my cross stitch, and she destroyed a bunch of other stuff. Like I had to throw away a pair of shoes and like a bunch of other stuff. The cross stitch of almost hurting the cross stitch made me more mad than anything else. And then, I mean, I was ready. I mean, we'd had her for like 3 days. I was ready to take her back to the shelter for that one offense. She's done significantly other worse things since. I've still thought about taking her back to the shelter, but she's just so cute.
Yeah, it's quick to get attached. That's for sure.
That's for so true. And when I went from being super mad at the dog on the first incident and to shifting the thought of she destroyed all my stuff, I must get rid of her, to, oh, she just doesn't know what she's allowed to chew on. I need to teach her. And that shift in thought process went from I'm mad to now I have compassion for the dog. And now it's like when she chews some stuff, it's like, well, that was kind of my fault because I left that out. Last night we bought one of these giant gummy bears for my son. Don't ask me why. It was there. He wanted it. We bought it. That's why. He ate maybe a third of it and then left it in the package on the couch. And I remember looking at that like, it's interesting that the dogs haven't gotten into that yet. But I didn't do anything about it. I just had that thought. It was a little fleeting thought. And last night I heard some, what's that noise? And I've learned that what's that noise is not a good thing. So she had eaten the rest of the 2/3 of the gummy bear. And so I called my son out to the living room and I said, did you eat your gummy bear? And he goes, no. I'm like, okay. Well, when she poops everywhere, you get to clean that up. And that'll remind you that next time we need to put stuff away.
Yes, a natural consequence.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
This morning he said to me, I'd love your input on this. This was
interesting to me because I just took the Myers-Briggs test for myself within the last year, and that's the only personality test that I've ever thought was like head on to me. And the lady that runs the Psychology Junkie. I was going to say Parenting Junkie, and I was like, no, it starts with a P, but that's wrong. Psychology Junkie. She has a test she created a video for kids. And so I watched that video and I tested my son out based on what I know about him. And the only thing I was unsure is if he's an introvert or an extrovert, because I see both. And if he's an extrovert, he and my boyfriend are identical.
Okay.
And if he's an introvert, then they're that one letter off. But I think that's why they butt heads as much as they do. So I showed it to him because he kind of understands more than I feel like 10-year-olds understand typically. And he was like, oh my gosh, Mom, that explains so much. That explains so much. Well, one of the traits that his personality doesn't like is being told what to do. So this morning he says, Mom, I need to finish my book today, and you need to force me to read my book before, no matter what, I'm not allowed to do anything else. You need to, because I need to learn self-discipline. And I was like, the key word in that is self. I can't force you to have self-discipline. Do you have any thoughts about all of that?
I do. And I think what really stood out to me there was that his trait, he really wouldn't like being told what to do. And then yet he's asking you to tell him what to do, no matter what. He can't do anything else. So, we don't know, but you can anticipate what's going to happen when he gets home from school or whatever, and you're telling him you have to do this. Is that going to go very well, even if he asked for it?
Nope.
No, it's not going to happen, right? So, if he says that he wants to develop self-discipline, that's like half the battle, right? Because it kind of speaks back to asking permission to solve a problem. He's identified that, maybe he's not reading the book as soon as he should be. Maybe he's spent too much time doing other things and not focusing on the book. Whatever the case is, he needs to build some skills to be, I would say, organized enough to be self-disciplined. At 10 years old, while his brain is still developing, the ability to plan, the cause and effect stuff, all of those higher order skills are still developing. And so he really needs a lot of tools. So I personally would chat with him and say, hey, remember when you told me to tell you to finish that book? I'm not going to do that, but do you remember it? Okay, so what are some things that need to be done in order for that to happen? And then it's not you telling him, but you're walking him through those steps so that he's the one who's doing it. Mm-hmm. And the more you model that process of the planning and thinking ahead, the easier the self-discipline will become for him, because then he knows what steps to take.
Yeah, that's you made the first point that I think is the most helpful for my brain is knowing that his brain is not developing that planning, or he's not there yet. That I had a guest on her book is called Raising Brains, and it's on my to-do list of reading. But so I'm fascinated with how the brain works. I'm not 100% like I understand how the brain works in children. more understand. This is why I like working with adults, because their brains are fully formed. And my brain's, I think, fully formed. So it, that makes that a little bit easier. With him, he is so mature beyond his years that his brain not being fully developed is frustrating to him. That he doesn't understand emotional regulation, and he doesn't understand the plotting and the planning. And there's that he doesn't see the consequence of gummy bear on the couch. The dogs are probably going to eat that because I would want to eat it. So why wouldn't the dogs want to eat it? The dogs are eating stuff that people don't want to eat. So why wouldn't they eat things that people do want to eat? So there's not that foresight of if then consequences.
Yeah. And it's really important for kids to understand why something is happening. So with a lot of my parents, my kids that I'm coaching, one of the first things that we talk about is how their brain works. And how it's really like adults can't really get away from some of these things either, especially the emotional regulation. If you are a grown adult with a fully developed brain and you don't have those skills to emotionally regulate, that's when you yell or you threaten, you bribe, whatever those, more fear-based parenting approaches will come in, because it's probably how you were raised, or it's what you've come to know. And that's like, it's second nature, right? When we don't know what to do, we fall back on those things. So we talk a lot about the brain and how it works. And then also really helping parents understand that we need to demystify these things for our kids, because there's so much, like our kids don't get a lot of say in a lot of things that they need to get done or that we have to ask them to do. And a lot of times we don't take those steps to really explain why. It's just because I said so, or just do it. We have to go get ready to get to school, or I'm making supper. I can't talk about this right now, right? Like life is busy. Everything takes time. But if we take those steps to really demystify what's going on, kids are like, oh, I get it. And then there's a lot less of the self beat up too. So if kids understand, well, geez, these parts of my brain are still developing until I'm 25, like the prefrontal cortex, that thinking brain, as Dan Siegel says, that's developing until they're 25. So that's why you see teenagers who make poor choices and you're like, you should know better. And it's like, well, they might not, like in that moment, they might not have really understood, or they might not have understood like how poor a choice it was. Like they didn't see all the consequences, right? We see it as adults because our brains are fully formed. And because we've also got that life experience, we've probably made some poor decisions along the line that taught us why. And our kids are learning. So if we demystify that for them and show them like, you're not a bad kid because you made a bad choice. You're not a bad kid because you get emotionally dysregulated and you're still learning how. You're still learning how. And that's the beautiful part. There's still so much time to learn and train our brains to make those connections and do all these things we want it to do.
It's so, my favorite thing, and these are why he calls it the life lessons, is to explain, why I do the things that I do with him, and and so that he doesn't have the ability to make those disempowering beliefs about my actions towards him.
Yep.
And what you just explained is even broader than my desire to do that. It's, I reflected, I was like, if my dad had spent a little extra time, and you gave a bunch of reasons why that didn't happen, which I love because there's compassion in there. But if my dad had sat me down and explained like why I got in trouble for this, or why this was not a good idea, just a little bit of more communication, I would say that 99% of my limiting beliefs wouldn't exist. because I just made that my fault. Like, oh, well, I'm stupid, or I'm unlovable, and this is why my dad yelled at me. And it's like, it's none of that is true. It's, we're busy, we're making dinner, we're, he was writing sermons, like that's just, it's life happens, and life is chaotic. I was explaining, Xander loves to argue. Somebody told me I love to argue the other day, and I was like, no, I don't. In my head, I said, no, I don't love to argue. I'm not going to say anything, because then that proves him right.
Yep.
But my son loves to argue, but he's been arguing the same points over and over. So it's always he doesn't want to do the dishwasher, and he doesn't want to read the book. And so I was listening to my mentor coach, and he said that all of the things in life that we have negative feelings about are because we think they should be different. And he calls my mentor the guy who talks too much. Like, he kind of does. He just has a lot of content, and I listen to all of it. So yeah, it does seem like he's, talks too much. But he heard this call, and Sean was being very sarcastic, and he's like, if you would just stop doing, wishing the things that aren't, you would have so much joy. But you don't want that, so don't do that. Right. And he's like, I want that. I want joy. Right. So he gave me the opening. Xander gave me the opening.
Yes.
So he's complaining about the dishwasher. And I said, honey, do you believe in gravity, right? He's very scientific, this kid. You believe in gravity, right? He goes, yeah. And I said, okay, great. What if you wanted to fly? Would gravity allow you to fly? Don't talk about airplanes. Would gravity allow you to fly? No. But what if you really, really, really want to fly? Like, would gravity make an exception just because you really, really want it? No. It's like, cool. That's laundry and dishes. They're not going to go away because you don't like them. They're not going to go away because you don't want them to be there. They're not going to go away if you complain really, really hard. They exist. We have to accept them. And the next time we did the dishwasher, I've always told him it takes less than 5 minutes. I set the timer. It took 4 minutes to empty the dishwasher. I was like, see, it takes less than 5 minutes. He hasn't complained about it since. So I don't know, maybe it worked.
I mean, you did a beautiful thing there. You made it relatable to something he understands and is passionate about, and you worked through it with him. Like, you taught, you modeled, you did it with him, and now it's just what happens. Does it mean that he'll never complain about it again? No, because we're human. But he's got those tools. He's got that frame of reference because of how you demystified it for him and made it relatable. So that's beautiful.
Do we want him to never complain about it again? Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Let's be realistic here. We don't need to hear that. However, right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Kids are just, they're fascinating, but they want to understand. They really want to understand. I don't think that there's a kid out there that's just like, nah, I don't want to know. I don't want to hear what you have to say. Like, they want to please. I think they even want to please us to an extent.
Yeah, definitely. They want to know. They might not say it. Mm-hmm. Some of them will send you the message that I don't care. I don't want to know. It doesn't matter to me. But that's a kid who's probably already been hardened a little bit because they haven't been allowed to know. I mean, there could be self-confidence stuff. going on there too that needs to be built up. Perhaps they don't feel connected to their primary caregiver. There's a lot of reasons why kids start to do those kinds of things, but the children are born ready to learn.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they are sponges. They absorb everything that's going on around them. They don't take all of it on, but I mean, they learn by seeing and hearing what we're doing, much less what we're telling them to do. And they definitely want to please, especially up until I'd say about for sure age 9. And then around there is when the peer group starts to take an even bigger role. So, you know, your influences maybe, I'm not going to say less, but what their friends have to say and are doing, just you start to see it grow in importance with a lot of kids. But that doesn't mean that, you know, your influence is less, especially if you're connected. But yes, kids, they do want to please and they do want to learn. Like that's what their brains are set up to do because it's still wiring. They're like looking for all those connections and what can I learn? What can I do? What can I see? There's that beautiful exploration level for them still, right? That some of us as adults could go back to see those small joys in life that our kids see.
Yeah. I've heard so many people say kids have it right and then we teach it out of them. You know, that they come into the world just this clean slate and just like sponges and wanting to absorb, and then we teach it out of them. And my mentor coach was saying that the best coaches ask why, or the best coaches are 3-year-olds because they ask why. Yep. And my son was 6 at the time, and I said, my 6-year-old still does that. And he said, good, because you haven't shut him down yet. And I was like, that just like stabbed me in the heart when he said that. And so I've just always encouraged him to, or I've always answered why. I've answered his every question that he asks. If I don't know the answer, then I tell him I don't know the answer. If it's a Googleable question, I'll say that's a Google question. Yeah. Sometimes it's not a Google question.
Yeah.
Very rarely is it not a Google question, but you know, if it's answerable, I'll answer it. And and my boyfriend thinks I've taken it too far because now he's doing the arguing thing. And it's turned it, he's going, you know, a little overboard with it, and I will still answer those same questions over and over. And my boyfriend's like, enough with the arguing questions of the dishwasher, like just do the dishwasher. So this was my last ditch effort of let's hope that this will be no more questions of why do I have to do this?
Yep.
This is why you have to do it, because gravity exists and you can't fly.
Yep.
It's just what it is.
Yep. And we're part of the team, the family team. We all have a role to play. We've got personal responsibility to help and, you know, be useful to the family at the most basic level, right? Yeah, they're all important things, but the questioning thing is good as long as it's respectful, right? Because we want our children to grow up not just being blindly obedient. That's a very dangerous place to be. We want them to be critical thinkers. And sometimes, unfortunately, it comes to our, you know, annoying us, but it's worth it in the end.
Yeah, it does. It can be. And I would imagine with 3, it's like times 3, you know, of the why questions, unless you've
definitely
part of their life. But
yeah, because they're still, my girls are still pretty young. So yeah, there's lots of why. I feel like I answer questions all day long, but thank goodness for Google. I was, you know, talking to my husband about that the other day, and I said, you know, when I was a kid growing up, if I asked my parents a question, it was go check the encyclopedia. Like for real. And I know that's really aging me, but this, you know, the girls are to the point now where they're like, do you know which cat has been on planet Earth the longest? And I'm like, I have no idea, but do you know who will? And they're like, let's Google it. And then, you know, we're learning some computer skills and typing stuff in the process. So it's a fun thing to be able to answer those questions why. Much different story when it was like go take a look in the encyclopedia.
Yeah, then it was like, well, I don't care that much.
No.
That was always my attitude.
Yeah. What letter am I supposed to search up right now? What,
right.
like, that's a whole sentence. So thank goodness for Google, because it's changed the way we can access information. Anyways, that's on a whole other.
Yeah, no, my pet peeve was when I asked how to spell something and they'd say go look in the dictionary, and I'm like, I literally don't know how to spell it.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to look it up in the dictionary?
Yeah.
And it was just because my stepdad didn't know how to spell it either.
Right? Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Just, well, this is the same thing with Google. I don't know. Let's go check Google.
I actually made up a word the other day, and my boyfriend's like, I don't think that's a word. And I was like, oh, it's a word. And I typed it in, and it auto corrected to the actual word. And I was like, it's right here as I've typed it in. Like, that's it, that word exists because I typed it, but it auto corrected.
That's awesome.
I patted myself on the back for that one. I was like, that was pretty creative of me.
Definitely. Definitely.
So is there a piece of advice that you want to share with moms?
Yes. In my own journey of, being that person who had a career and then becoming a mom and finding who I was in that, I really learned that our children are our best teachers. And it's a hard one at times because we can find that we're not quite as amazing or as all put together as we thought we were. And they can really shine a light on those. I don't want to call them deficiencies, but on the areas that we need to work on, the areas for improvement. And the beautiful thing about it, though, is that we all have the ability to improve and change what we're doing. So a lot of parents come to me, mums in particular, saying like, I am so stressed out. I'm so frustrated. My kids don't listen to me. They don't clean up. Everything is a fight. It's just every day there's something going on, multiple things going on that just make me like want to tear my hair out. And what I tell them is that the first thing you need to do is you need to look in yourself and see what you've come to parenting with. So like that's your childhood, how you were raised, your beliefs. Do you struggle with perfectionism? All those things. And you need to be aware of it. You need to acknowledge it. And then the next thing you need to do is you need to take accountability. So how are those things impacting the way you're parenting and what your child is receiving from you? So if you're that perfectionist, and I say this from a place of love, because this is where I once was, I was that perfectionist saying, that's not clean enough. Wipe the table again. And just really not seeing what I was doing. And then once I stepped back and said, wow, like that's incredibly damaging for my kids. And are they really supposed to know how to wipe the table properly the first time they've done it? Or even the 10th time? It takes a lot of time. And like, never mind, your gross motor and fine motor skills, right? So take accountability for what you've got going on. It hurts because it's hard to admit it and it's hard to change it. But then once you change it and you take that action, you will be empowered to solve behavior problems going on at home and to set your kid up for success. And if you're not sure how to do that, find support, because you should not stay stuck. Parenting is not going to be easy, but it can be very simple and it can be enjoyable more time than not. And that's where I would like all of my mums to be, all of the mums, because this is a big chunk of our lives and you have to enjoy it. Not all the time. That's just not the way life works. But if you take action and you do those things, just make a huge difference in your life.
Oh. And I have very supportive in-laws and even ex-in-laws. And I was telling my ex-in-law that that Xander's driving me crazy with the book arguing thing. And she said, that's his job at 10 years old, is to drive you crazy. And you're doing your job because it's working. And I was like, well, that's a interesting way of looking at it, because if I was giving in, then he wouldn't be driving me crazy. And he's learning the lessons that he needs to learn because I'm not giving in. And yeah, I thought that was, it's like it's not supposed to be enjoyable 100% of the time, but it's not supposed to be miserable 100% of the time either. And I think that there's a lot of moms out there that are really struggling with that. And that's a beautiful message. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you bet. Happy to share it.
And is there a book that's been impactful for you along your journey?
Yes, I've been thinking about it since you mentioned it. And I really love Discipline Without Damage by Dr. Vanessa Lapointe. It's a parenting book. It deals with discipline, which is like priority number one for many moms, right? And parents and families. So it gives you amazing background into why your child acts the way they act before she really then dives into some strategies and techniques. But what I personally love so much about this book is that she's brutally honest. She's going to call you out on your stuff, and you're going to learn in reading it, you're going to discover like why you are the way you are, and like how the way you were parented has impacted you and what you're now doing with your kids. So it's kind of like you kind of reparent parts of yourself in learning how to meet your child's needs in the most positive way for them and you. So it's not just parents, you're the problem and now you're just out of luck. Sorry. It's parents, you are the part of the problem. Here's what you can do. This is what your kid's responsibility is. And now work together to do it. And that's what I think that's real life, is families working together, not just it's somebody's problem and nobody else's. So I can't say enough good things about her in general too. She's incredible.
And I was just thinking like, oh man, I used my last credit. Like I'm not going to get another credit on Audible this month, but no, I think that's important too. You were probably parented the same way, with wiping down the counter like you're not doing it right. And I would imagine that did something to your self-esteem at the time, and now you caught yourself and you're aware of it, and you reparented yourself to be able to parent them differently. And I resonate with that story. Just my stupid cough.
Well, every generation is different, right? Like if we go back, grandparents, they did it a little bit differently because they wanted to do things a little bit differently. And then your great grandparents, and then your grandparents, and then your parents did things a little bit differently. And now we're doing things a little bit differently. But we get to come at it from this really great place where there's a lot of science and research into what's actually going on in kids' brains as they grow and develop. And that is just like, that opens up so many doors to understand, like, the impact of no, rewash it again, no, do it again, no, do it again. Like, I don't know, like 30 years ago, it wasn't it's still not totally mainstream knowledge to know like what that does to a child's brain, developing brain. So we've got a really good spot right where we are here, but yeah, we are products of how we were raised and our experiences, and each of us has different ones. So it's that awareness and the accountability that are really important.
Absolutely. And I am very grateful for all the information that we have access to, literally at our fingertips or at the end of a sentence. Because our parents didn't have that. And I have a friend I mentioned on the podcast quite a lot, where she's actually healed her relationship with her mom. But what I've mentioned several times is that she would be mad at her mom for not knowing this stuff that she literally just learned. And I said, you realize that that's what's happening right now. Like you just learned something. She didn't have the internet. She didn't have, yeah, she had a psychology background, but they didn't know the stuff that they've literally learned, like you said, in the last 30 years. When did we learn that the brain had elasticity, or neuroplast, whatever the word is, that we could change our brain? They literally thought that you couldn't change your brain. Isn't that crazy?
It is. And they thought that the brain, just the way you were born, like you just knew. So like get mad at a 3-year-old because they can't control their tears or their emotions. And it's like they literally can't. We have to teach them. You have to model it, right? It's crazy.
And then nobody modeled it for us because they didn't know that was a thing. And so our generation is probably the first generation that's understanding the impact of not expressing our emotions and not knowing how to teach our children to express our emotions, because everybody's talking about it like you should express your emotions, but we don't know how, and we're supposed to teach our kids. Like it's crazy. And like, have some compassion for your parents. They didn't know.
Yeah, it's a real gap, right? It's a real gap between us and our parents. I can only imagine what my girls will grow up saying about how I chose to do things.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear. I'm taking the positive approach. I'm excited to hear about what my son's going to say about me as his mom. And
you have to.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I don't remember how we ended up Facebook friends, but I am part of your parenting group, and your sneaky children thing popped up on my, you did a live about children sneaking right after Halloween. And I was like, well, there's no reason that you and I shouldn't have a conversation on my podcast and let other people eavesdrop. So
yes, I love it. I was so excited when you invited me. I was like, yes, I love to talk. I love to talk about this stuff.
And I don't want to forget to ask you, where can people find you?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can find me everywhere online, basically, just like most. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and I am also on TikTok, and my handle is at Janelle Kent Coaching.
Perfect. So there will be another episode of Imperfect Momming next week. And until then, keep healing. Bye, guys.
Thank you for tuning in to Imperfect Momming. It's time for us to step up and realize that our power is not in trying to shape our children. Our power lies in shaping ourselves into the people we want our children to model themselves after. Don't just do it for your kids. Do it for yourself. When you become a more self-aware, compassionate, and confident person, you and everyone around you benefit. For more information about me and my work, visit alysialyons.com. That's ALYSIALYONS.com. See you next time.